Thank you very much. So it's exciting to see so many people here interested in event-based vision. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit in general first about SLAM and where we've come from in that kind of research and where I think it might be going, and then in particular how that's informed some of the things that we've been working on in this area of reconstruction, motion estimation, and SLAM from events, which is a really fun and exciting area to work in. So, I'm sure you don't need much introduction to SLAM, this problem of simultaneous localization of mapping. So it's the essential problem of how a robot or device understands the space that it's in by moving through it and making onboard measurements. And in particular, in my research, I've been interested in this fairly local problem. So a single camera in a small area with real-time operation and closed-loop operation, and really focused on trying to make that better and better. And then a particular breakthrough in my career was the mono-SLAM system. So back in 2003, we were first able to show a real-time, sparse 3D mapping system that could estimate the motion of a single camera in real time. So since that time, where the emphasis was really on, in SLAM you have to do localization and mapping and solve both of those problems, but really early on the emphasis was on localization as the output, but now increasingly we're interested in what you can find out about the environment. So we've been looking at things like dense mapping, and now semantic understanding is what's really going on. And my kind of interpretation or spin on this is, this is not something different. This is SLAM evolving into a general real-time spatial perception capability that will be a crucial layer in embedded AI or IA applications. So IA here meaning intelligence augmentation, so any kind of situation where there's also a human in the loop, like augmented reality. And we found that you need very much the same capabilities, whether you've got an AI, a robot, or this kind of IA situation. But for me, it's all still SLAM, and that means that we can all keep working on SLAM, which is great. So of course, these sparse systems really mainly focusing on localization and then some kind of sparse mapping output or semi-dense are now rather mature. They're starting to enter real products, but these are still not massively mass market things. And there's still a lot to do to enable these to be much more capable and become widespread devices. So these are some you've probably heard of. This is one that I was particularly involved in with Davison, so I worked with them to design the SLAM system that's in the Davison 360i robot vacuum cleaner, which has now been on sale for a year or two. So really, since the time that I was working on mono-SLAM, there's been tons of advance in what we can do in real-time SLAM. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of particular breakthroughs. So dense SLAM was a really important one. So we started to be able to not just map sparse points in the scene, but actually map whole dense surfaces. So this is some of the work, particularly from Richard Newcomb. So around the period 2009 to 2011, you had a system called DTAM, which was dense tracking and mapping, which was a system that alternated dense reconstruction and dense tracking, so a fully dense pixel by pixel direct SLAM system. Just to show you a quick sort of highlight of where we've got to recently in this kind of work. So this is some work from the Davison Robotics lab in the last year or so, showing a real-time multi-scale reconstruction. So this is actually a multi-scale height map reconstruction algorithm. So it's a single camera flying over desk. This is not an event camera, this is a standard camera, but taking advantage of the properties of a standard camera, that you can move far away and see the whole scene, or move close up and see real detail. So here we move in tight, close to this circuit board. We get high quality close-up depth maps, and we fuse those into this really now detailed reconstruction, sub-millimeter quality. So that's been really exciting, and thinking about what that enables in terms of applications in robotics or whatever. So the other thing that we've been increasingly interested in in our lab. There's also lots of other labs very interested in this. How do we go beyond geometry to maps that also have meaning? So these are some results we presented in this conference, a system called Semantic Fusion, where we alternate a dense SLAM system, here using a depth camera, with CNN-based labeling and segmentation to then combine produce a 3D labeled output. So in these systems, what we've seen is that rising computer power that we've been able to throw at real-time vision has enabled us to do more and more in real time. And we've seen increasingly this story that algorithms from computer vision that we considered offline, too expensive, have gradually kind of come into real-time vision. And that goes back to things like bundle adjustment, which I kind of initially thought I can't use that in a real-time SLAM system. Now, of course, it's a standard thing to do bundle adjustment in real time. Image retrieval, the sort of things we use for loop closure in SLAM, regularized dense reconstruction in the systems I showed you, and now of course CNNs. These are all sort of now real-time type things. Here's just a standard graph that you'll see from NVIDIA or similar, showing how more and more compute power has been available year by year, and of course that is continuing. But real applications, and I think my involvement in things like the Davison 360i have led me to understand that it's not just about doing more and more and throwing more and more resources. First of all, you've got to think about making your systems really robust and useful, and a lot of these vision systems have been kind of brittle. But then the other aspect is that we really have to think about the constraints of real products in terms of compactness, low power, and those kind of constraints. A system that we worked on a few years ago, which for me has always kind of given a bit of a hint at the sorts of thing we should be aiming for, was a system called SLAM++. So we presented this at CBCAR in 2013. So this is a pure object-based SLAM system. So just to show you a quick bit of video about this. So we're moving a depth camera around the scene in real time, but rather than doing any kind of pure geometric reconstruction, dense mapping, we're detecting objects and then directly building a map at the level of objects. So you'll see that the geometry here appearing pop, 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 as we recognize chairs and tables, they just pop in. It's this very efficient map, but it's also semantically meaningful and predictive and useful, and you can really do things with it. So I think our kind of mission in SLAM at the moment is how do we get back to a system like this, but in the completely general case. So obviously something that could deal with any type of object. This system was very limited. We needed very specific tables and chairs to deal with. Okay, so some kind of thoughts about the future of SLAM, given the things I've already said. So I think we've got the perception capability that we need for these future systems in AI or IA, which is, we want always on and aware geometric and semantic perception of everything of importance to complete a task. Now, of course, some people in computer vision, deep learning, would probably say, well, let's not worry about what that representation is that you're going to actually need to do that. Let's just say, this is the task I want to do. This is the input. Let a neural network discover in somewhere between those things what's the representation you're going to need to achieve a task. I still think, and a kind of hypothesis, is that something which is pretty recognizable as a SLAM system is still going to be very generally useful. So this component that you can build a sort of persistent, close to metric representation of a scene incrementally, get better and better, will be very useful and will probably be found in all sorts of different applications, and will, for instance, enable you to build a system and then maybe later on discover something else you might want to do with it. And having this kind of close to metric representation will just be very generally useful. But still, I think we need to move towards evaluating how well a system like that works via much more task-oriented performance measures. So whether, while we've focused a lot in terms of, this SLAM system is good because it has this, RMS error on trajectory, we need to think more about things like, can this SLAM system detect a change in a scene? Can it predict the time to contact with the object or something like that? Those are what I mean by task-oriented performance measures. So in terms of methodology, increasingly we'll see many components of SLAM systems becoming learned rather than designed. So we're already seeing that in things like the semantic labeling component of the system I showed you. But you've probably seen a lot of the results recently. People are now doing things like learned visual odometry. These results are getting surprisingly good. And so I think we'll see the systems changing, and things that we've been designing for years might become learned. But I still think these components might be joined together in architectures that we'll we'll recognize, and we'll be able to give names to modules and say, okay, that's the tracker, that's the labeler, that's the fuser, that kind of stuff. So then the other big thing, as I mentioned earlier, the constraints on real products that we want to build. So power usage is a huge one, sensor, processor size, complexity, and cost. So we've got the things that we want this system to do, and then we've got the constraints, and we need to somehow close the gap between them to enable these mass market products. So yeah, this need for efficiency in real-time vision and power is a really important thing. There's one project we've been actively working on called the Pamela project. It's a joint between Manchester, Edinburgh, and Imperial, and we really want to open up research in the joint development of real-time vision algorithms, programming tools, and architecture. So looking towards unified design of algorithms, processors, and then also sensors is where we really think we can get these big performance improvements. So this is just a picture from some software we released called SLAM Bench, which is an implementation of Connect Fusion that runs in a kind of test harness in multiple languages, and you can run it from anything from a huge GPU down to a tiny embedded board, and really look at how different parts of the algorithm work. So, clearly the really important end of that is the embedded end. That's where the really valuable applications are. And smartphone system on chip technology is advancing very fast. That's clearly going to provide the template for the near future of how we're going to build these embedded devices, and there's lots of activity. But will that take us to where we really want to get to? So let's say tiny devices, say something the size of a pair of glasses that can do this full semantic SLAM thing with all-day battery life. So that still seems miles away. And really, with those kind of things in mind, I got increasingly interested in looking at neuromorphic kind of ideas. So I'll talk about event cameras, obviously, a lot in a minute. But another really interesting thing that's going on is developments in processing. So we've already seen the talk from Brian about True North. That's very much in this field, of course. So there's this strong feeling that AI, including vision, presents a new type of workload which doesn't really suit the current processors we have, CPUs and GPUs. So really, the sorts of algorithms which AI and vision really need are sparse message passing algorithms implemented on sparse graphs. So just to take one example of a company I know quite well in the UK called GraphCore. So they're building a new sort of processor. They call it an IPU, Intelligent Processing Unit, or graph processor. So it's really designed in quite a different way. It has thousands of pure distributed scalar multiprocessors on a single chip. So unlike some other truly neuromorphic things, this is still digital and synchronous, but it's got this neuromorphic, for me, kind of idea of really distributing computation and devoting a lot more of the chip area to memory and interconnect and massive bandwidth between these processors, as opposed to logic and computing in a CPU or GPU. So GraphCore at the moment are really targeting deep learning acceleration. So they're going to be releasing an accelerator card for server farms doing a deep learning. But they've got some really interesting visualization. So this is a visualization. I think this is probably AlexNet, the classic kind of recognition CNN. So what they do is analyze all the processing that happens in that neural network and map that onto their graph processor. And this is a visualization of sort of a modular output of how that happens. So something I've been thinking about a lot is this kind of real-time closed-loop robot vision problem. What would it look like if we tried to map it to that kind of graph-like processing architecture? And I think it comes down to searching for the graphs in the algorithms that we know. And there are some obvious graphs in SLAM. There's the graph that exists in maps. So we tend to have these graphs connecting correlated things in maps. There's a graph of the real-time processing loop, so the sort of modules I mentioned, tracking, mapping, fusing, relocalizing, or whatever, connected, with data flows between them. And then there's also obvious graphs around sensors. So a camera has a graph associated with it, which is this regular graph of pixels. But a camera, won't necessarily be plugged directly into any kind of processor. It's going to be, somewhere else on the device, connected by an interconnect. And so a really crucial thing is going to think about, what data are we sending between the processor and the camera. And I think increasingly we'll want to drive that down. Clearly we want to get away from these fat video pipes. Events are an absolutely fantastic step there to saying how can I sort of do more on chip in the camera and reduce the amount of data I send to the processor. But for me that's probably a first step towards, we'll probably do more and more on chip in the processor, and then we may also eventually have bi-directional transmission here where we're actually making predictions from the main processor, and then the work that the camera does depends on that, and then it sends back some kind of differences. So how possible that is, I really don't know, but it's fascinating to think about. Okay, so now to really get onto event-based vision and the things that we've actually done. So what I've talked about has informed our approach to event-based vision. So we've concentrated on sort of event-by-event generative methods of how to use events to do things like SLAM. So we've got a fully predictive model going on where we're kind of incrementally building some model of the scene and the camera's position in it, and then we're referring each event to that model to try and make sense of it and then update our estimates of what's going on in the model. So for me, this takes us on the route to generally aware vision systems where we pay attention to every piece of data, and it's very much in the line of research coming from dense SLAM, direct SLAM. So it's those kind of methods. So when we process event by event, we can minimize latency, which leads us towards kind of incremental filtering type methods. And certainly there are problems associated with that. So dealing with very high event rates is something that's already been mentioned today. That is a problem on a CPU. You just can't handle millions and millions of events per second. But I think that problem will gradually go away. Hopefully, if we get to this more integrated sensor processor architectures in the future, where maybe you've got a parallel interconnect between the sensor and the processor. So the first piece of concrete work that we did in event-based vision, so it was this system called simultaneous mosaic and tracking with an event camera. So it's a system where we followed a kind of trick that we'd done before in SLAM work, so to say, let's not immediately try and solve this really hard 3D SLAM problem, let's solve an easier one, the pure rotation problem, which is still a SLAM problem, but it is limited. So when a camera purely rotates, you can't estimate depth, but you can aim to reconstruct a whole kind of mosaic or panorama of the scene. So obviously an event camera doesn't, by default, give us an intensity mosaic, but one of the things that we assumed and tried to prove was the data was all there. So in this change data from events, there is enough data to reconstruct intensity. So the way that our method works is essentially two alternating estimators or filters. There's a filter doing the tracking, so here we were using a particle filter, but that could easily be another type of filter, and recently we're using a Kalman filter instead for this. And then there's another filter which is trying to estimate information about the scene. So we presented this at BMVC 2014. So Han-Mei Kim was the lead author, and this was also in collaboration with our colleagues in Paris. And in fact, we won Best Industry Paper at BMVC, which was a bit of a mystery to us at the time why it was industry paper, but anyway. So just to give you a little more detail on how that works, so this is the tracker that does, this is the filter that does tracking. So here it's a particle filter. So here we're representing, this is our current estimate of the mosaic of the scene, and this is our current estimate of where the field of view of the camera is relative to the scene. So we're using a DVS 128 camera. So because it's a filter, at any point in time we have a distribution over possible positions that it could be in. So these different coloured squares are showing different, a number of nearby hypotheses of where the camera should be. So in between getting events, we assume that there's some motion of the camera, so we spread out our hypotheses to represent motion uncertainty, and then we get an event. And let's say we receive an event at a certain pixel coordinate, and it's a positive event telling us this pixel's got brighter. What we don't know is which of these is the correct hypothesis of where the camera is. So what we do is evaluate that event compared to our forward predictive model. We've got an estimate of where the camera could be, we've got an estimate of the mosaic. Which of these events most agrees with that? So in this case, it's going to be either the blue or the red one, because those are sort of in positions which are consistent with a positive event, so therefore we'll give those a higher weight. So essentially one event just gives us a tiny little nudge or update in our camera pose. So the other side of it is estimating information about the scene. So actually we do this in two steps. First we generate a gradient estimate for the scene. So at every element of the scene, so these are not necessarily the same size as pixels of the camera, but our mosaic has a resolution, and at each pixel of that mosaic we're estimating 2 degrees of gradient. And we have a kind of 2x2 Cannon filter at each element of the scene. So with an estimated gradient vector and then a 2D covariance. So again, when we receive an event, so this will be the pixel of our event camera here, and then here in the background you can see the resolution of our scene mosaic. When we receive an event, we have a current idea of what the gradient is at this pixel in the mosaic, and we also have a current estimate of what is the velocity of the camera, or what is the velocity of that pixel over the mosaic. So essentially what an event does is gives us information about the dot product between the gradient and the velocity, because basically when pixels in the event camera move across parallel to gradients across edges, then we get events. So it's the dot product between those things. So we get some information about the gradient in the direction which is the dot product of the gradient and the velocity. So by taking that measurement, we got some information and we reduced uncertainty. Then a little bit later on, we might pass over that element of the mosaic again, moving in a slightly different direction, and get information in that direction. And so as that happens several times, we gradually reduce our uncertainty. So the final step is upgrading this gradient map then to a full intensity reconstruction. So if this was a 1D problem, you can see it would be quite straightforward. So if we've got a 1D intensity image, this would be the gradient of the image. So to get from gradient back to intensity, you integrate. So the 2D version of that is not quite as simple, but it's a fairly straightforward thing, well known in computer vision. So you solve an optimization problem where you say, I'm looking for the intensity reconstruction, which minimizes this cost function, which has 2 terms, and this says as far as possible, at every point the gradients of this should match the gradients that I have here, but then I balance that against some smoothness terms. So this is pretty well known method. So what I forgot to do was actually show you the video of this working, so let me just go back and do that quickly. So this is the paper from 2004. So pure rotating camera. Here are the events. Let's just skip ahead there to show how we can estimate the motion of the camera, which updates event by event, estimate the gradient map, and then also estimate in real time this intensity reconstruction. And there are various examples of that. Okay, so I'd better move on. So actually, once we'd done that, we always had in mind we want to do 3D here. And actually, for me, it was always a fairly, straightforward is probably the wrong word, because it took a little while to get this working. But the change to 3D is not a big one. So let's just think about the forward model involved here. So when we have a purely rotating event camera, and let's say there's some objects in the scene that have gradient, then as I said, we get events when we have motion across edges, or so that the motion and the gradient vector are parallel. But when we're purely rotating, it doesn't matter how far away these objects are. If they have the same gradient, they'll give us the same rate of events. So when we translate though, if we have two objects in the scene which have the same gradient, but one is closer than the other, then because we're translating, we'll get a greater rate of events from the one that's closer. So that's the simple thing. So we just build this forward model that says the rate of events I expect at a pixel. They depend on the rotational motion and the gradient, but then they also depend on the translational motion, the gradient, and the depth of the scene. Or specifically, it's, the rate of event is proportional to the inverse depth of the scene. So in this system, this is the 3D version of what I showed you before. All we essentially do is we change the pose representation of our camera to now a 6 degree of freedom, one rather than a 3 degree of freedom pure rotation. And then we also add a depth map estimation component. So now there are 3 filters rather than 2. So I'll jump straight to the video and show you how this works. So in fact, we presented this at ECCV last year and won best paper. So this is really a sign, I think, that the vision community is now taking computer, event-based things seriously. So let me just show you this part. So this is showing the system working in real time. So moving the camera around in 3D, and you'll see the different sorts of estimation going on. So the 3D pose of the camera, these are the raw events, this is the gradient map, this is the intensity map, and then this is the depth map. So there's still a lot of engineering needed to turn this into a really robust, usable SLAM system, but for us it's the concept here that's really important. So this is just showing a relatively simple keyframe-based SLAM system doing 3D reconstruction, where we're running this system to estimate depth and intensity keyframes, and then we're joining them together into this graph here. Okay, so there's one more thing I'd like to briefly show you. Just switch to some different slides. So one more piece of work that we've done with Event Camera, which has taken a related but slightly different track. So this was work led by Patrick Bardo at the Davison Robotics lab, and this was presented at CBPR last year. So we tackled here the harder problem of not just a pure SLAM situation where we assume that the camera is the only thing that's moving and the scene is static, but what happens if we point a camera at a generally moving scene where we have independent motion as well? So in a simple case, there have been lots of algorithms presented which can do a pretty good job of estimating the motion in the scene. So if you look at moving, here's like a cable that we're moving backwards and forwards against the background, and we get these positive and negative events. And if you want to estimate the velocity of that thing, you can do things like fit local planes spatiotemporally in the event space and estimate the speed that things are moving at. But what if you want to do it in this much harder case where the camera's moving, there's lots of clutter in the background? It's quite hard here to see how a simple fitting type of method would be able to pick out the independent motion of this cable that's moving across here. So the approach we took here instead was a much more general estimation approach. So this is really building on work over many years in computer vision in estimating optical flow in a kind of variational smoothed way. So what we do is we use a sliding window method here and an optimization approach. So here we see some events caused by motion, and then each of these are thinking about, here's one pixel in this scene, these are the positive and negative events that I received there. So obviously these are just 3 pixels, actually we've got 1 to 8 by 1 to 8 of these. So think of this concept of a spatio-temporal window where you've got the resolution of the camera, and then you've got time, and then you've got the events kind of populating that. So we use that kind of idea, and we think of a sliding time window, sliding up this spatio-temporal volume. We slice the time window into regular time intervals, and our goal is at every kind of position in that volume, we want to estimate the the velocity that's happening there, and also the intensity. So we're going to still jointly estimate velocity and intensity, but we're going to do it in this much more general form. So as the sliding window slides over the events, every time it advances by a little bit, we're going to try and get a new estimate of the intensity and the optical flow. And you'll see that this is fully dense estimation. We're going to get an estimate for every pixel, both of velocity and optical flow. So the way that we do this is to formulate a cost function here and solve it using variational optimization. So we've got various terms here. So first of all, we've got our data terms. So this one here is basically saying that because I've measured an event at this pixel at this time, I know that the brightness between here and here, so this pixel between these times, has changed by this amount. So that's some data, that's a measurement that we have. We also have a measurement to say this is a place where we haven't measured any events. That's also telling us something. And then we balance that against smoothness terms. So this is a term that says the flow field I expect to reconstruct, so U here, is expected to be somewhat smooth in space, somewhat smooth in time, and then also the intensity field I estimate is smooth in space. The final thing here is what we call the optical flow constraint. So this is very well known in computer vision. So it says that the brightness I measure at this time at this pixel, if we have this much velocity, then I should measure the same brightness at this displaced place at a forward time. Okay, so that's what we do, and let me show you the results. So it works pretty well, and in fact we can also even run this quite fast, currently on the GPU. So just for comparison, on the left here we have some video from a standard frame-based camera, and then what we're showing here is a dense reconstruction of the intensity. So this is from a DVS-128 event camera, and this is a reconstruction of the optical flow. So here where we're using this color visualization. So you can certainly see noise here in places where this trade-off between the noise of the event camera and the smoothness has been a tricky thing to get right. But we're getting dense and mostly correct estimates here. So there's a couple more examples here. This one highlights the fact that, of course, we can track rapid motion, one of the big advantages. So here we've reduced the kind of slice time that we're trying to estimate over to 5 milliseconds. So here we're doing this estimation effectively at 200 frames per second, and we can see this lovely smooth and subtle motion of the ball thrown into the scene. And another nice thing we can do is we don't need to match up the reconstruction resolution to the camera resolution. We can actually do this at super resolution. So here we've got a reconstruction at 384 by 384 from input at 128 by 128. So, again, it's really this thing where the time super resolution of an event camera can be traded off for, spatial super resolution if we've got the right algorithms. Okay, so just to come back and conclude, so I have this view that SLAM will continue to evolve into general real-time spatial perception for embedded AI and IA. Co-design of sensors, processors, and algorithms is the path to the performance and efficiency we need for really mass-market products. And then event-based reconstruction, SLAM, motion estimation is a fascinating and important research direction towards these goals. So, thank you.